All right. Welcome to the show, guys. We are here today in the summer months, which is going really fast, and we are heading into the school season. And we are going to talk about student debt, college loans. And to join me to do that today is my two colleagues, Liz Gillette and Stefan Revelo, who are working with a client base that are most likely in the thick of dealing with this after they graduate from college. So they are going to be the experts on this today, and I'm just here to have some fun with these guys and ask you some questions and get through this thing. So how you guys doing?
Well, thank you for having us. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. It's a topic near and dear to our hearts, I'm pretty sure, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, you guys spend a lot of time in this area. So maybe we should just start out and just sort of, it's such a big topic. It's in the news constantly. We hear about it often. Maybe just start out and tell us like why this is such a popular topic. Either one of you can take it.
Yeah, I'll go first and kind of.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, student loan debt right now is obviously a big topic. I mean, first and foremost, why it's so important is because the value that it can provide. Obviously, education is, at least growing up for myself, was always preached in my household. Coming from both my parents were the first to go to college in their families, so it was really important as I was climbing up the ranks for me to actually to follow the same path. It's become a huge issue just with the rising cost of college. People are struggling to figure out how to pay for it, and then if they choose to go a private school route, there's plenty of people with six-figure balances, and then they're graduating college and they don't even know where to start. A lot of them feel that their future is in jeopardy because of the decision they make to take out these loans. I know at times I felt straddled by that obstacle as well. So I just think that right now it's a very pressing thing, and I think it's important to kind of talk about and have more open communication around student loan debt and kind of just ways that we can attack it and help progress our financial lives.
Yeah, I'm going to go to you, Liz, because I already want to go off topic. Based on Stefan's first comment, I want to ask about the value it's providing, because for your parents, Stefan, where college was, it probably was like this super valuable thing, and it became sort of the standard to hit. And it feels like because of these costs you just mentioned and talking about, maybe that is dwindling a little bit. I guess
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Liz on that.
Yeah, sure. So the data tells us that overall in this country, we still see a benefit from
Yeah.
higher education. Typically, you're going to hear about income potential, career advancement, and overall financial stability. So overall, the numbers are still telling us that getting and seeking a higher education does provide more opportunities and a leg up, in your own personal finances. And so some of those pros, it's kind of similar to taking out a mortgage. It's the only way you can make something that's cost prohibitive suddenly become an option, right? That's what student loans allow us to do.
Yeah.
They also let borrowers who have no credit score, no credit history, take out a loan. That's pretty unique and rare. So that's the main reason why people obviously continue to get into debt. What's really of interest to me too is the difference between, we talk about it generally as student loans, but when someone is getting their bachelor's versus their associate's degree, you actually have very different outcomes. When you go for an associate's degree, the funny thing is that in theory, it's supposed to be the shorter timeline, but the numbers say the opposite. People tend to spend longer getting their associate's degree. They take on more private loans, which we know tend to have a higher interest rate percentage. And they actually have a higher probability of having kids during the time that they're getting their degree, which we love them, but those little guys are expensive.
Yeah.
So so there's a lot there where there's value, and we want to continue to expose people to more education, but there's a real downside, certainly, as has been, highlighted in the news for many years now.
Yeah. So there's value to getting an education, and it sounds like that the way a lot of people can afford this now is by actually taking out loans. Like you mentioned, Liz, it gives us the ability, like buying a house and to pay for it over time. So like, where do we stand in terms of, do you have any numbers around like the levels of debt, like how much college loans are out there? They're probably staggering.
Yeah, we like numbers around here. Yes, 1.78 trillion with a T is how much the most recent number I saw on student loan debt. That's obviously more than any other debt outside of mortgages. That number, I mean, when you get into the billions and trillions, for most people, it's hard to kind of even imagine. So just know that in the 21 to 22 school year, another 94 billion was borrowed by students and their parents or guardians. So that really gives you a vision of how deep it is, and then how much it's accruing every single year.
Oh, yeah, we'll have to get into the accruing in terms of like, not only like accumulating in terms of more debt, but also like deferring payments and interest and all that stuff. That's definitely a route we can go. Like, does that include personal loans? Is it all private loans? Is that number? Is it just everything to pay for education?
Yeah, great question. No, it includes the traditional student loans. So it's going to be the private and the federal/government loans, you know, how most people think of it. Yeah, so that's not even if someone took out a cash out refi, right? That used to be an option that it feels like forever ago. But no, it wouldn't even capture things like family loans or personal loans or credit card debt or cash out refi or HELOCs. Or, I mean, you know, we've seen people take a lot of different approaches to paying for education.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say kind of, and then to break down the number a little more, that 1.78 trillion. So roughly around 92% of that is federal loans. So that's loans kind of given directly by the government, and about 8% are private. So I'm not going to say that's a great thing, because loans in general is not always the best, but it is good to see that the majority is in federal loan debt, just because those private student loans, as Liz mentioned, just have high interest rates. You don't get any of the benefits of, if there is potential loan forgiveness, you would be excluded from that. So if there is a good side to this, at least it is healthier that the majority is in those federal loans rather than kind of on the private side.
Oh yeah, imagine the private side. If you stop paying that debt, I mean, could ruin your financial situation pretty quickly, and it's going to be less leniency in terms of collection and so forth, because people on the other side are really trying to maximize their profits on that.
Yeah. Do you know how many months of non-payments before they're allowed to send you into default?
I know how many months of non-payment before default? 3?
Because default obviously is a pretty heavy hitting. So how many months? Federal loans, the answer is 9 months. So there's a tip. Private loans, how many months before they're allowed to send you into default?
I'm going to guess 3.
Fine.
I was going to say 4.
Damn, you guys, the game doesn't work if you know it right away. Yeah, the answer is 3.
Yes.
90 days. Well done. Well done. Yeah, 90 days of being like, I'm getting my life together. I lost my job. I'm trying to figure it out. And default, right? I mean, default is a whole new thing. It's past forbearance, past deferment. As a matter of fact, you can't access forbearance or deferment if you've been in default. They're allowed to garnish your wages if it's federal debt. You can't even discharge it in bankruptcy if it's private debt. So they're not playing around.
Yeah, that's really difficult to deal with. So like, let's go to like the issues that would create that, because I think that's what's driving this whole problem is people are getting these valuable educations, but then what's happening? You think that you'd be able to pay back the loans. So do you want to tackle some of these issues that are hampering the students paying back the loans?
Yeah, definitely. So as a part of the 2020 graduating class, I was the first of that first COVID class. So I left for spring break senior year and never returned back to college. So that was kind of my experience, and dealing with kind of my peers that were just kind of entering the workforce. I personally had a lot of friends lose jobs. So they had job offers, but due to COVID, due to companies doing their layoffs, a lot of those candidates had their jobs rescinded. That can obviously create a problem, as luckily the payments were in deferment, but just create a plan, even just feeling confident that they're going to be able to attack this debt when you're not working. Obviously that can be a big hurdle. So I know for people in their earlier mid-20s, I know that certainly was a hurdle and still currently is, just with the job market right now. And then another thing is just general cost of living. So kind of everything, inflation obviously is at record highs right now. And people are struggling to find apartments, or just the grocery bills double what it used to be a year ago, things like that. Car loans, getting the interest rates on those are super high. So just the basic things that people are needing to live, people are struggling to kind of pay enough for that. Salaries are not increasing as rapidly as some of these inflation numbers. So there's been a lot of younger people kind of in a bind trying to figure out, do I prioritize my debt or kind of just keeping the lights on in the house? So it's just been a huge thing that many borrowers are facing right now.
Well, how long do you have once you graduate to start making these payments?
You mean how long before you have to make your first payment?
Yeah, how long do you have before you start making your payments? Like your parents kick you out of the house and, you got to get your rent, you got to get your car, and then you got to start paying back these loans.
6 months.
Yeah.
6 months. And what happens during that 6-month time frame?
That's a great question. So it depends. Do you have subsidized loans or unsubsidized loans? So the biggest number that what Stefan and I talked about, taking out student loans, right? And he said about 8% is those private loans. The overwhelming 43, I might be misquoting by a percentage or two, is unsubsidized federal loans. And that's not the one you want, right? Because subsidized means the interest is being paid for you, or it's being delayed a bit during those 6 months. Unsubsidized means it's accruing during that time.
So you graduate. Well, let's go back to the beginning, your first year of college in these unsubsidized loans. You take out this loan in year one. You have this debt. The interest is accruing for the next 3 years. You graduate school. You have 6 months before you have to start paying these things back. But this whole time, you're accumulating interest, which is piling on top of this debt that you're already paying.
Yep. So when you show a client those numbers, they took out, 30,000 and they owe 35 and they haven't even, they're just graduating. It's crazy. It's gone up from its original balance. So yeah, it's a real challenge. So that's often a big part of the discussion, is that just kind of how fair is that? Is that predatory, right? The idea of like predatory lending, to be able to have so much interest accruing. Yeah. So unsubsidized loans are the ones you want to avoid. If possible, you would take advantage of as many subsidized as you can, right? They're not grants, they're not free money or anything, but the subsidized at least helps you because the interest is being subsidized during that time.
Well, let's stay there for a second. Like, how does that work? Like in the beginning, you're going through this, applying, you're trying to figure out how to pay for education. How do you end up there?
Mm-hmm. So you have to complete the FAFSA, right? And you have to provide your information. It used to be called your estimated family contribution, your EFC. Now, I didn't prepare for this answer. So they renamed it, but it's generally saying how much can your family afford for college, and then how much aid do you get? And that part really throws you off, because by aid, they often mean student loans. So aid does not just mean grants and scholarships and work study and all of that. So what you do is you apply, you provide all that information. FAFSA has gotten cleaner and easier over the years, which is good. It's a lot more electronic. You can pull your previous tax returns. So they're moving in the right direction. But you put all the information in, and then you're offered an aid package. And it'll say, we're offering you this much. So you could look at your own personal finances and say, do I have to take advantage of all of the loans offered to me? Right? Because that's the only way to make this work. Or do I say yes to this loan, turn these down, and say, mom and dad or grandma and grandpa can help, where the person can get a part-time job.
So it's a family contribution that this is all calculated on. And it sounds to me like, so you complete these forms, which I've done in the past, which it's really hard to do. It's painful, to be honest with you. And you get these packages back, and you may not, because your parents are making a lot of money, you may not be eligible for subsidized loans. And so the only way you're receiving these subsidized loans is if you fit in this sort of place of income that works.
Yes. And traditionally, you would have found private loans being lower interest rates, like over the last 10 plus years than federal loans. So a lot of borrowers were deciding, well, I appreciate the fact that they're a lower interest rate, but everything we talked about where private loans have a lot of disadvantages too. Now with interest rates as high as they are, you're actually better right now off with the federal loans. But the Parent Plus loans tend to be more expensive. That's where a parent takes the loan out for their student. They tend to have even higher interest rates than the federal loans. So it's like an ebb and flow of whatever works best for that client's particular financial situation.
And then the subsidized loans, they're not accruing the interest during this time frame of while you're in school. That's one of the big benefits of that.
Yes.
Stefan, do you have anything to add with your personal experience? That was that like in school? Were you like, oh my God, like it was just that must mount on you, right?
Yeah. So it's actually kind of interesting. So kind of when I was taking out the student loans, I knew what I was doing, but I honestly didn't know my loan balance until I graduated and I pulled it up. And I was like, oh, okay, this number's actually luckily not as bad as I anticipated. I'm lucky that I grew up in the state of Florida, so higher education is actually extremely affordable there for in-state, especially in-state tuition. They offer things like Bright Futures and these other things that I luckily was in that helped reduce my tuition costs. But yeah, you're kind of going through it. And to be honest, at the time, you don't really know. At 19, I really didn't have a firm understanding of really what I was doing. I knew I was getting education. I knew it just seemed like the right thing to do. But it really wasn't until I remember it was during COVID. And I was like, oh, let me just check out what my balance is. And that was really the first time I saw the total number. But like I said, luckily, it was not a crazy amount of money. It was lower than the average. The average student loan borrower has around 30 grand, 30 to 40. So luckily, I was below that. But it still felt a lot of kind of anxiousness of kind of how I was going to approach it.
Yeah. So you're still a young guy and fairly responsible. And so you're not even in college. You're not even thinking about your balance. You're just getting your education. You're going along. One day you click on this thing, you open it up, and there it is, Liz. You got some debt to deal with.
Yeah, that theme of having to delay life events is kind of what Stefan's talking about too, right? That feeling of like, well, I can't do X until this is done. And so that accruing process happens, for a lot of people, they're viewing it overnight. And then you're saying, well, what can I do? I mean, my rule was I won't walk down the aisle with student loans. That was my rule, which is funny because I actually wasn't in this field then. So I just had gone through my own journey. I had a little bit more than 90,000 of student loans. So, and, graduated during the recession. So that was a little bit tricky. And so just trying to decide what that would look like for me and my now husband. It was a really crazy experience. And in our household, I had some academic loans and some academic grants and some athletic scholarship, but certainly still a lot of debt to show. My husband did 2 years at a junior college, and he got the same degree. And so he walked away with significantly less loans, and he likes to show me that our diploma looks the exact same. And so it was really interesting in my whole household imagining what we'll do with our 3 kids because, that really made a big difference for him. He paid his way through the junior college, got in, and then his debt was not the one holding us from walking down the aisle. That's for sure.
Yeah, so it will be interesting as you go there, since I'm already there with 3 older kids, and you just sort of, you want the best for your kids a lot of times. And so a lot of the times that discussion, it sort of happens in the background, but of like, hey, go to the community college for a couple of years, get the education, but it's really not looked at that hard in a lot of cases. It's really, really interesting because you're right. You do get the same diploma and the same similar education, but kids want to go, out of state. They want to go where they want to go. They want to go where it's warm. They want to go to Florida, and that same Florida education that Stefan's paying $7,000 for would have costed myself $50, where my daughter almost went. So, all right. So we really are dealing with. So it sounds like you get out of school, you just have this debt that you haven't had to deal with before. You got unemployment. that you may run into. Your job may not, or you may have to have a job that's maybe not what your field is, what your education was for. Maybe you just don't make enough income. Then you've had all these, you have this interest rate you got to deal with, and maybe some accumulation stuff that's happened. So let's move away from that and talk a little bit politics. We're not going to take a side or anything like that. We're not going to get ourselves in trouble here. But tell me what's going on from a political standpoint. There's been some things that, or some talk about helping to reduce the burden on individuals who have accumulated debt. And there were some programs in place beforehand. Does anybody want to have brave enough to tackle that?
Yeah, I can kind of speak on what was in place a little kind of prior originally. So kind of a few years ago, Biden proposed for giving up to $10,000 per student loan borrower, and then up to $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients. All that really means is kind of people from kind of lower income families that were eligible for these particular grants, they would be eligible up to $20,000. So it was supposed to be just an instant wipeout for that 10 grand balance. And I remember when I was filling out the application, so there was an application to fill out. I did do it. I was approved. I provided like 3 pieces of information. It was literally like my name, my email, and like a birthday, or they asked for very minimal like information. So even when I was filling that out, and there's income threshold requirements as well. So you had to make under $125,000. But when I was filling out this application, it didn't ask for my income verification. It didn't ask for any really information at all. It was just like, here's your name, submitted, and I was approved. I didn't show anything. I didn't show them my account balance. I didn't show them my income. So even at that point, I was a little skeptical. I was like, okay, I really didn't provide much information. So then that was kind of delayed until really recently when the Supreme Court decided that they were going to rule against that. So Biden now is exploring other avenues. That original situation is no longer on the table due to that ruling from the Supreme Court. But now there's still a lot of talks coming from kind of Biden and his administration around going through other avenues to try to find a way to kind of still get some relief, if possible.
So you didn't benefit from that?
Oh, not even a little bit, unfortunately. So,
there's
but
other. I was going to say there's some other ways that debt can be forgiven that was in place before that. Liz, you want to nonprofit?
Yeah.
Maybe if you work for a nonprofit.
Yep, absolutely. That's probably one of the most popular ones that people are aware of that's happened under Biden's administration. Is he revamped the PSLF, Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and the numbers before used to say like less than 1% of people who applied for this forgiveness actually got forgiven, and it's because there was just a lot of red tape. You had to be in the right loan program. There was no continuous tracking of it. It was hard to understand whether you had a certified employer, and so on and so forth. So I've had some personal experience with it, not with my loans, but doing it to help out a family member. And you can actually see the program is so cleaned up now. You log in, you see exactly how many payments you need. And for PSLF, you need 120 on-time, in full payments. So 10 years worth of payments. They don't have to be consecutive. You just have to have a qualified employer. So public service, so that can be teachers and firefighters and a variety of different careers. So all you do is log into the system, provide your information, and then give them the contact, of who they would need to contact in HR or who'd have the information that can verify your employment. And now it is a much more cleaned up system where the loan forgiveness that happens at the end, there's not a tax bomb. So in certain types of loan forgiveness, they say, okay, we're forgiving $40,000. Well, it's going to show that you made $40,000 of income that year because it was forgiven. That does not exist under PSLF. But even more importantly than everything I've just said, the whole CARES Act loan pause that happened in March of 2020, it's gone through 9 pauses that have continued through this time period. Hands in the air, way more than I would have expected as a financial advisor. Pretty extraordinary. So what that means is during that time, people didn't have to make payments. But more importantly, there was no interest accruing. And so we explained what that looks like when interest accrues. Well, people in this PSLF program, if they could keep their job working for any kind of nonprofit, they realized that it would be unfair to say, hey, this doesn't count towards your 120 payments. And at the beginning, they're thinking, maybe we'll do this for 6 months. Well, fast forward 3.5 years, and every single one of those borrowers that's on PSLF, as long as they stayed employed, it's being marked on the record as you made your loan payment, which is pretty extraordinary given how long that this has gone on. So what's interesting, to your point, Jim, about like providing advice, about how we recommend changes to clients, is it's so dependent, because if you're on that PSLF track, no, you don't want to throw money at the debt while there's no interest accruing. That's the natural logic. But really, you just want that to be a bigger amount forgiven. And so you do the opposite. You get on the income-driven repayment plans, and you make sure that you're making a minimum type of payment so that after those 120 payments, it's forgiven. So that's a big one that has happened in the last few years. Now that pause is officially stopping. We're told. I'll still believe it when I see it. But in October 1st, the payments are going to start being due, with interest accruing in September. A few of the other things Biden did was he helped disabled borrowers be able to discharge their debt, where if you receive money from the Social Security, Administration disability income, you're automatically registered to have your debt discharged. And also getting refunds from colleges that were closed. A lot of people were tied up in that. And most recently, he's coming up with like an income-driven repayment plan that will make it more tolerable for people who were not expecting to make their payments so soon. So there's been a lot of changes in this space for sure.
So it sounds like the PSLF was one of the biggest ones, where not only did that get cleaned up so you could track it a little bit better and figure out like how much you owed and how many years you worked for a nonprofit or a public service, but also then you got this sort of double benefit of you didn't have to make payments, and it still counted towards your years of service. That's huge.
It's incredible. And I will one-up it, and I promise then I'll get off my little pulpit. But in addition to that, if you had made payments during the pandemic, right? So you thought, oh, now's a good time to pay it down. They probably won't help us with PSLF. You're actually allowed to ask for a refund of your payments and say, give me the cash back. I'd rather have a larger amount that is forgiven in the end. So really unprecedented things seen during that time period. So the one catching the headlines is not getting the debt forgiven, the overall general debt forgiveness, but lots of progress, I think is safe to say.
So there's, I'm glad you guys are focusing on this area, because there's a lot to cover, and you really need to understand the different types of debt that's out there and how to manage your income. Like if you plan on getting forgiven, you want to plan to not pay as much. And so speaking of that, like that is one of the benefits of getting some of these student subsidized loans, is there's flexible payment schedules. Can you guys give us some detail on how that works?
Yeah, so there's lots of different repayment plans. You're going to see it written as like income-driven repayment, income contingent repayment. It gets really interesting when a couple's doing married filing jointly, and then you're on an income-driven plan for your debt forgiveness, but your spouse makes a lot more. And so there are actually times where you would want to do married filing separately, even though there are so many disadvantages of that, in order to get the loan forgiveness to happen. But yeah, there's lots of different payment plans that you can do. Standard repayment plans would be paid off in 10 years. Again, you have the forbearance and the deferment during different periods if you needed to take advantage of that. You can do accelerated payment plans that as your income grows, you actually get it paid off sooner. So that's where blending it into the whole picture of your financial life and knowing what's your interest rate, what are your other goals. If you're looking down the barrel of like a 10-year loan payoff, do you really want to say, I just won't buy a house, I won't do this for 10 full years? You might have to just start prioritizing one over the other.
Stefan, when you're in this situation, you get out of school, you had these options. I mean, you were telling me earlier before out of these calls, like you took different approaches at different times to dealing with this. You want to provide some insight to how you tackled this issue in your life?
Yeah. So right when I graduated, I think just like any logical person, I went to YouTube and typed in, do I pay off student loan debt or invest? It was literally my first search. I studied finance in college. I didn't have any personal finance really information. So I still I didn't know how to attack it. So on that.
Whoa. Wait a second. You studied finance and you didn't have any. So let's go back to that earlier value conversation. What were you doing? Sorry.
No. I think that deserves its own podcast episode around the curriculum of that. I loved my experience at Florida State. That's where I attended. But unfortunately, a lot of the personal when people think finance, they think money or they think money management. But in the sense of a college degree, it's really not that. It's more like corporate finance. So you're looking more at cash flows, and you're not really dealing with 401k. I didn't know what a 401k Roth IRA, that stuff, unfortunately, was not exposed to me.
So you weren't learning about like personal finance. It's more just general finance in general and not personal finance. So, all right. So sorry, I had to stop you there. You go onto YouTube, where we're all getting educated these days, and we're even providing education here. And you type in this search, and that takes you where?
So yeah, first video I find is by a guy named Dave Ramsey. So he's a very well-known kind of personal finance educator in the space. And he's very anti-debt, eliminate debt at all costs, a very safe approach in that regard. So I started watching his videos, and his approach was, you don't invest any money until your student loans are paid off. And I was like, all right, well, this guy looks like he knows what he's doing. He's got a couple million his subscribers on YouTube. All right, that's the approach. So, and I got hooked on the videos in general. So for like 6 months, I was watching Dave Ramsey 5 hours a day. I was just an absolute juggernaut with Ramsey and baby step process. So I'm attacking my student loan debt aggressively. I graduated around 26 grand. I cut it down to around 13. So I cut it in half in about like an 9-month span. And then I continue watching YouTube. So I get a lot of my information from there. And I stumbled upon these other kind of finance YouTubers. These two individuals, it was called the Money Guy Show. They're two CFPs. They run a wealth management firm actually down the street from Dave Ramsey Solutions. They're actually in the same city. And then they were bringing a whole different approach to student loans. So when I found them, I was aggressively paying off. So I was just purely attacking it with gazelle intensity. And then as I started to learn about these other guys started saying, hey, if you're in your 20s, you might want to slow down the student loan debt payment. And I was like, oh, this is untreaded waters. So I was wanting to hear them out, and they were just talking about the opportunity cost that I was giving up, being so young. I mean, being in my mid-20s, how my dollars could be better served in other places. So pretty much they were talking about an arbitrage. So my interest rates on my loans were around they're all between 3 and 5%. And then obviously money invested in the stock market typically over time generates anywhere from, let's say, 7 to 10%. So they were doing the concrete numbers of running two scenarios of someone paying off the debt aggressively or someone just making that minimum payment and investing the difference. And it showed the person that was making that minimum payment, investing the difference, they didn't pay off the debt as quick as possible. The other individual did, but they had way more money because they were putting that money into Roth IRAs, into 401ks. They were actually investing it, and it was outperforming that 4% student loan rate. So as I started to see that, I took a look at my own situation. I said, okay, let me see how this looks like. I was crunching numbers, and it kind of made sense for me as well. I'm lucky that my interest rates are so low. So at that point, I decided to change gears. And then, so when the student loan payments do start back up, I will be resorting more to that minimum payment, and I have been investing since then. So any money that in theory, before that I was directing towards the student loan debt, I've actually peeled back a little bit in, everything. And I'm actually directing that towards investments, so that I can have my money working for me more than just saving me on a measly kind of 3 to 5% debt off to the side.
Stefan, may I ask you something? When you made the switch from student debt payoff to investing, did you get the same hit of adrenaline as when you would be paying down the debt and seeing that number? go down?
Great question. No. So it's funny. I was thinking about this yesterday. I'm like super glad that, well, I said, I wish I would have had that money now. So that 13 grand towards the debt, I'm like, man, I can just like imagine if I had it now in my Roth IRA. But when this does start back up, seeing that my loan balance is no longer whatever 26, and I see it close to 10, and I'm seeing it so low, it does help me sleep at night. So it is a unique thing where I was feeling so good, I was paying it off, and Dave Ramsey does a great job of like firing you up. So it did take some time to like educate myself and see the value of, okay, like you're not going to see the gain, because in investing in general, you're not going to see it for 10 years, really, the true benefit. So you really got to practice delaying that gratification and being like, all right, you're not going to see it now, and I won't see it in 5 years, but in 10, 15, 20, this decision that I'm choosing now to kind of cut back on the student loan debt and focus more on investing will pay off. But yeah, to answer your question, it didn't satisfy me as well. And when I saw a student loan balance kind of decreasing over time.
Same. There was something really powerful about like, it can't come back. I mean, unless you're going to pursue more education, it's like, it's gone, baby. Like it's gone and it's not coming back. And the hit that I would get from watching those numbers and retyping in my new numbers, like, you know, because to your point, you could be investing and then the market goes down. And so like intellectually, you know that you're going to get the return, but there is something very powerful about that feeling of debt and just seeing the snowball effect, right? Like all of the different approaches, Jim, there's lots of different approaches you can take to paying off debt. And one of them is like the snowball approach. And that one, it helps you build momentum. And it is like, it's good for, you know, it's good for the adrenaline, I would say, versus like that, oh, I put money in the market 10 years from now, it might be worth something. Like, yeah, they're just two different experiences. You know?
Yeah, that's an interesting take. We'll have to, I just maybe run the numbers in your time. Maybe that's a separate conversation you guys can have about like the strategies of paying down the debt and working through that. That's fascinating because as you like to talk about, there's not only this, do I pay down debt or do I save here? There's these competing priorities that we all have with, you know, starting a family, buying a house, you know, moving, changing locations, buying a car. There's so many competing priorities when you're young that, you know, the paying off debt for a loan tends to take a backseat in a lot of cases. You know, just being honest, because you got this life to live, and so it's a major issue. We have had a great conversation, and we're at 39 minutes. Even Jake and I don't go this long. So this is a good conversation. It's been really helpful for me, not dealing with this on a regular basis. So maybe what we'll do is we'll come back with some maybe some shorter episodes, and we'll take some of these topics we talked about today, and we'll break them down and talk more specifically about some different strategies, you know, in future episodes. But do either of you have anything to share before we cut out of here?
Yeah, I kind of have just one final thing as people prepare to like set up a plan to pay off their debt. I would say, so the payments do start back up in October, but I would log in today and kind of just look at what the balance you're dealing with, kind of what that minimum payment's going to look like. And actually, the more reason why I'm recommending that was when I logged in recently, my student loan provider was just acquired by another company. So when I logged in, I had a zero balance and I was kind of freaking out a little bit. And I went to the payments and it even looked like there was a payment. It said -13. Like it looked like a payment was made. I was like, I didn't make this payment. I went to my email, I'm freaking out, and I saw, oh, it was acquired by another company. So I had a whole new login. I had a whole new website now that I deal with my student loans. I was in a panic for like 20 minutes. So I recommend, if looking at that now and not right before then when the payments are due and now you don't have your carts, you don't have your payment set up and you're missing a payment. So I would recommend just giving yourself more than enough time to kind of evaluate that to ensure that you're on par to kind of attack that debt.
Most people would have celebrated instead of panicking.
Yeah, well, I to be true. So I sniffed around a little bit.
Liz, do you have anything to add before we cut out here?
Yeah, that's great advice, Stefan. Did it go to Mohela, by the way? Is that who acquired
It's an
yours?
Advantage Aid.
Oh,
Also neat.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, that part can be tricky, and then your credit report is gonna be like, paid off, new loan. It's very confusing. People get really hung up and like, "I don't understand, I didn't take out student loans last year." It's like they got
Yeah.
acquired by someone else. Um, yeah, I think my final words would just be that always look at the ROI of your education. You know, I mean, that's worth thinking about. Just know some of the numbers, like what is a reasonable starting salary in the degree that I'm getting? Because we didn't even touch on that. Like sometimes you got to be pretty logical about what degree you're getting and whether there's a likelihood that you could have those loans paid off within 5 years or 8 years. Like, is that a reasonable assumption? Because that one can be pretty debilitating to
Yeah.
get a degree that you can't do much in, and then have to have the loans for it. Um, all in all, I would just want to encourage people that if there's a will, there's a way. I was overwhelmed and I didn't think I would ever get out. And if you're just willing to do the hard work, you'll get there. You'll get there. So just keep trucking along, keep using that education for good if it's already too late and you have your student loans. But outside of whether it gets forgiveness, whatever Biden does, whatever the Supreme Court does, all we can control is ourselves, and just know that there's a path at the end of the tunnel. It's going to look a lot like hard work.
It always does. That's an awesome point, Liz. And what you just said just led me to like multiple more conversations, like how to think about it. But all right, we'll end there. Thank you guys so much. You guys do great work helping people navigate all this. And so anybody dealing with this, I would highly encourage you to reach out to Stefan or Liz and get their brains to work on it. So thank you both for spending some time with me today.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
See you guys.